Welcome to Substance Free 02043, brought to you by Hingham CARES. I'm your host, Kristina Root, and I'm President and Program Director of Hingham CARES. Our mission is to reduce substance use among youth in our community. We want kids to make smart choices around drugs and alcohol. To that end, we provide education and programming. Our guest today is Lori McCarthy from Herren Wellness Center. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. Well, great to be here.
Lori is Executive Director and Partner of Herren Wellness Center. She's spent the last 20 years working with those facing the disease of addiction. And prior to Herren Wellness, she was a member of the senior management team at Gosnold on Cape Cod. So you've been working in this field for a long time. Mm-hmm. We're so pleased to have you here with us. So tell us a little bit about your ties to Hingham.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me and us at Herren Wellness. So I grew up in Hingham. We moved here when I was 10. We moved here, my father opened a restaurant in Boston. We moved from upstate New York, and we settled in Hingham because my cousins lived here, and my father had ties from college that lived here as well. So I've been here since I was 10 years old. After high school, moved out of town, moved around, did a lot of different things, and ended up settling back in my early 30s with my husband, who's also from Hingham. And we have been here ever since, raising our children.
Great. So what interest did you have as a young person? Any sports or extracurricular activities?
Interest is let's see. I got here at 10, a young girl, grew up in the 60s. In the 70s, so not real athletic, not really doing any kind of sports. We were a skiing family. My brother played football. I had two other sisters. So interests were really playing outside and friend groups and neighborhood kids, being on the water. Mm-hmm. So family, friends, really just about that.
So you're very open about the fact that you're a person in recovery yourself,
yes.
in addition to working with people who battle addiction.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you started to drink?
I remember actually the day that I started drinking, or the night. I was 14. Every summer we spent at a place called Long Pond, outside of Plymouth. Mm-hmm. My family, my cousins, it was a family home. So my cousins and us and my family, we spent the entire summer there every year since I was born. It was passed down from my dad's parents. And I was sort of in the middle, I guess. I had a lot more older cousins and siblings. And so they were out exploring and doing things. And I was often, not invited because I was too young. A little scared of it, actually, to be honest. And I was at a party on the pond, and I mixed beer with Kool-Aid. And
Deliberately,
because I didn't like the taste, obviously. And I don't know. I was really more afraid of alcohol because my mother, her drinking was really terrifying, actually. So, I did it to fit in, absolutely. And then that really followed me through high school. It was never anything that I couldn't wait to do in high school because of what I was growing up with. So I had a lot more fear than interest, but I did it, to kind of fit in.
Because
everybody did it. It was in the 70s, and there wasn't anything like this. There was really no education. People just didn't know, mm-hmm. and it was sort of an accepted. It was kind of accepted. Just be careful, don't get hurt. I think it was more. Parents were more
permissive,
but not in a on purpose way. More of a, oh, you'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Or sleep it off, or you're staying at somebody's house. So there was just no education around it.
Right.
And there wasn't a lot of, the difference I think today and back then, this whole phenomenon of blacking out, like it's so common and it's such an acceptable thing. Like with my kids' generation actually. And back then, I had this conversation recently with somebody. No one ever wanted to black out. It was kind of like an embarrassment. You know, you would be like horrified if you couldn't remember or, so it's shifted so much that people, it's kind of like you drink to black out.
Right.
So the culture and the intensity around alcohol has changed so much, in my opinion.
And I think the use of harder substances has also come into play as well, not just with alcohol, but other things as well.
Absolutely.
Did you ever use any other substances, marijuana, anything else?
I did smoke marijuana. I think I was in 9th grade. I remember that day as well. I was at a football game, and my friends, older friends, you know, like, let's go behind the bleachers or wherever it was. My dad was at the game, actually. My brother was playing in the game. And I was absolutely terrified. I didn't like it. I wasn't. Again, I had a lot of fear around substances. Hard drugs, absolutely scared of that. Never did acid or anything like that. And so I dabbled in marijuana here and there, but not there. We didn't have. We really didn't have, we didn't have access back then in the town. Mm-hmm. Things weren't introduced to us. You know, there was definitely acid. People dropped acid, so to speak. But cocaine wasn't around when I was in high school. It was a couple years after I graduated from high school that came into the picture. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty benign.
So you're very open, too, about the fact that your dad battled with alcoholism. You just mentioned that your mom did as well, which I never knew.
Oh,
so,
okay. Yeah.
And, you know, not trying to open the family closet and pull out all the
Yeah.
skeletons, but
Hingham.
you said that your dad owned a bar. You've said that he recognized at some point that he was an alcoholic. He went into recovery later in life. How did that decision impact your decision-making, your lifestyle choices?
So I was 15. So my parents, we moved here. My dad opened a restaurant, and things in my family got really chaotic. So my parents ended up separating. Alcohol was definitely a contributor to that. You know, whatever my parents were going through is, you know, whatever they were going through, but the effect that it had was a lot more increased drinking in the home and discourse in the marriage, and ultimately a breakup, and that had a profound effect on all of us. Right. It you know, my dad was then living in Boston. No one talked about it. We never talked about it. We couldn't really name it. It was just disruptive, and you know, we're all kind of trying to go to school and be normal, but it really wasn't normal at all. So a couple of years later, at 15, my father, you know, he would always come down, and he always took us out individually for like dinners, plays. He'd take us to concerts, and he's told me, he was dropping me off at my mom's house, and he said, I just want to let you know, I have to tell you something, that I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm an alcoholic. And I said, no, you're not. Like, isn't that the other one? Like, because I never...
You thought your mom was the one with the problem.
Yeah. Because drinking, and not just what it really demonstrated is how alcoholism really can present itself so differently.
Right.
And so he said that he was going to meetings and he wanted us to know. And from that point forward, it was every opportunity he introduced us to a sponsor. He had his sponsor talk to us about what the disease of alcoholism is. He recognized all of the trouble in his own family. His dad died at a very young age. It was due to alcoholism. His grandfather, his brother was killed at 33. So my dad was 35 at that time when I was 15. And
So he was looking to stop the cycle.
but
basically.
he didn't know, and that's the other thing is you really, I mean, so like alcoholism can be it's progressive and it can be a very slow, process that you get to that all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm in over my head. What's happening to me? And especially back then in the 70s when you really kind of don't know. So he knew that something was terribly wrong. He wasn't sure it was connected to alcohol, but he had a friend from upstate New York that he grew up with that he knew was going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he called him and said, I think I'm in trouble and I don't know what to do. And he, kind of how AA works, he said, and he was living in upstate New York. And he said, let me make some calls. And he called back and said, a friend of mine who knows somebody knows a retired fireman in Quincy. He's going to call you. They call him Big Jim. So my father gets this call at the Scotch and Sirloin at the restaurant from this guy. Hello, and want to meet me at the Pancake House in Quincy. And my father's like, okay. So he went down and he met this man who ended up being the most significant person in his life.
Wow.
That said to him, you have one problem. It's a shot of alcohol. And my father was saying, I got a lot of problems. My family's a mess. My kids, I don't know how they're doing. My wife isn't well. We're not well. And he said, those are situations. Your problem is alcohol. If you take care of that, everything else will take care of itself. And he never had a drink again. And he said, how do I do it? And he said, I'm going to take you to an AA meeting. And he went to AA meetings until, he was in memory care 40 years later. So,
wow.
And so my father was I think relieved and also very, everything made sense when he started learning about the disease of alcoholism through AA. He went to therapy. He wanted all of us to go to therapy. We were teenagers. We were like, get lost. What are you talking about? But what I remember how it affected all of us as teenagers in, a chaotic environment in a broken home was there was always somebody that was present. He always picked up the phone. We always knew there is a present, capable, grown up, in charge that is there 24 hours a day for us.
So
And
that grounded you.
that was our takeaway, and the fact that he loved his life not drinking. So he was one of these men. He owned the Scotch and Sirloin. He loved the restaurant business, and he loved his recovery. And he traveled, and he loved helping people. So we were so fortunate. It wasn't until I got into the field, actually, that I realized there was stigma around being in recovery. We didn't grow up with that.
Because you'd only seen the joyous
We
piece.
saw the sharing, the oh my gosh, you can't believe what I learned today, or the education that he gave my siblings and I, especially my sisters, like alcohol. If you're under the influence, you can't defend yourself. If you're under the influence, people can take advantage of you. Like you always have to be on, very, never punitive, never demeaning, just very
Practical.
Practical and be careful type of thing. And I had my stuff in high school. I was at 15, I was kind of already off and running, and I was pretty shut down, actually. In 16, 17, I ended up moving out of my mom's house and moving in with my father when I was a junior in high school. And so I was very, we were all pretty closed off, I guess. And so I was my journey then was just be strong, numb. So my alcohol use picked up.
While you were with your father.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure that was challenging for him. Or did he recognize it?
I don't know if he recognized it. He never, he wanted me safe, and he would just tell me all the time, like, you know, how much he loved us and to be safe and be careful. And again, we're going back, it's like 1976.
Right.
So there's still no education.
Right.
It's, you know, really it's be a power of example, but you're not taking other people's inventory, you know, you're not like calling people. It wasn't like nowadays, if you recognize a problem, address it immediately. You know, there's no more like, wait, why are we waiting?
Right.
But that's all because the only reason why we're at that point now where we don't wait for someone to be ready, we're going to go in first and we're going to present everything, and we're going to hope people are ready, but we're going to lead them, and we're going to, you know, intervene earlier. And because really it's with all of the education that came as a result, truly, honestly, of the opioid epidemic is the only reason. All of the focus in the education came on addiction during the opioid epidemic because of the loss of life with, you know, suburbia and colleges and the whole, you know, perfect storm of the opioid epidemic and what transpired during that time forced the education.
Right.
And in that education, thank God, we you know, started to recognize addiction as really as a medical condition. And then the question with the researchers became, if we do preventative medicine with other chronic conditions, why aren't we doing it with addiction?
Right.
And why are we waiting for stage 4 before we say anything?
Exactly.
Why aren't we, you know, so I used to have this, kind of like this joke sort of that, not really a joke, but when my kids were little, and I would say to everyone, I was very open with my recovery, when we moved back to Hingham, and I remember saying to somebody, you know, your kids go off on a field trip, and you, like, you know, put your sunscreen on because of melanoma. You know, we might have melanoma in the family, or put your sunscreen on, or wear your sunglasses. And I would be like, we have alcoholism in the family. Don't drink, don't take anything. You know, it's like very common. You know, it should be. We should be educating and talking about it, and family systems and history around addiction and substance use disorder and mental health when our kids are young,
Right.
so that they can be comfortable with if and when the struggle comes. It's not a fall off the cliff, which it really, to this day, is still a shock to the family system.
Right. When was it that you realized that you had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol? When did you decide that it was time for you to take steps like your dad had?
When my drinking changed, I remember it. It was kind of happened gradually, but I was actually in the restaurant business. I was working for a national chain. I was in management. I was young. I was in my 20, 23, 24, 25. I lived in California. I was transferred to New Hampshire, to Newport, Rhode Island, and then Annapolis, Maryland. And over that time period, my drinking really picked up, like, to a daily thing. Like, at the end of, you work 6 days a week, you work 60 hours a week, and at the end of the work day, there's the wine is at the end of the day, waiting for the relief of all the hard work. And then on my days off, with my friends, we would go skiing. We would go, we would go do things. We'd plan things, and the drinking was intense, and it was that was what the goal was. I was, I couldn't wait for the party, and I lived for those days off, and I remember at a period of time where I knew that, like, this is not right. This is it was not just a glass of wine. It was really bad. And
were you concerned about the impact on your physical health, waking up the next day, or did you think this is too much?
Well, physically, it was every day I woke up sick and tired, and so the one glass of wine turned into two, and your body, it's a physical addiction. It's a physical dependence. So you need more for the desired effect. And that's why, the increase happens, because if you're constantly taking it in, you're going to need more and more. And so I would wake up knowing, like, with guilt, and like I would make all these, I would promise, like, I'm not going to drink today. I'm going to take the day off. And I could never keep that. And then my memory got really bad. I would forget conversations, not during drinking, but the next day I was emotionally unstable, cognitively, not rational. I was getting promoted. I worked really hard. I was like type A, like, let's go, but I was not, I thought I was having a nervous breakdown, actually, is what happened.
Wow.
And I called my father from Maryland, and I had a few blackouts that were devastating and humiliating. And I called him and I said, I think the restaurant business is killing me. And he said, are you sure it's the restaurant business? And I said, oh yeah, it's all day long. And I left. I left that company, and I moved back home.
So you didn't make the connection to your drinking?
No.
Even after everything that you had seen your parents go through and your father had taught you, it's kind of interesting that...
Because my father, I didn't feel his alcoholism. I felt my mother's, and my mother's drinking was very different. It was not... It was, so I didn't, that's what I would identify with. So when I started having blackouts, that is when the fear came.
Okay.
That is when I got pretty scared of that, but I also didn't connect the emotional deregulation to alcohol. I didn't get that. So I had other family members that had quit drinking before me, that were younger than me and older than me. And that was significant because when I moved home, they were living their lives and, like, loving not drinking. Like, they felt really good, and they had their own reasons for stopping. And
you recognize that contrast with your own lifestyle.
Yeah, I was like, I kind of want that. And I had a particularly horrible Memorial Day weekend. I went down the Cape. I drove home under the influence, and like, severely under the influence. And I woke up the next day and I went to my sister's, and I said, I think I have a drinking problem. I don't think I can stop. I think there's something really wrong with me. And she said, which is kind of funny today, she said, don't tell Dad. He'll make you go to AA. And the universe, I mean, this is like such one of those God moments. It was wild because it was the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. And my sister lived in an apartment that had a sliding glass door and a road. And my father pulled up in his car out of the blue
while you were there
and knocked on the door and said, you guys want to go to breakfast?
Oh my goodness.
And I burst out crying and said, I think I have a problem, a drinking problem. And he said, really? And he said, okay, let's go to a meeting. and I was completely, offended because I said, I'm not an alcoholic. And he said, why do you have to be an alcoholic to go to a meeting? It's the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop. Do you have a desire to stop? And I said, yes. So I went to my first meeting with him. I saw all his AA friends. I burst out crying, and I, reluctantly went to AA, actually, reluctantly, because I couldn't really identify. I was young, but everyone said, just keep going, and don't drink, and then I fell in love with what I learned, and what I came to understand, and the people, and I got a job in Boston in advertising, and I met a whole new set of friends that were my age that lived in Boston, that were working at the Globe and radio, and it just kind of really took off from there, the recovery.
So the recovery impacted the trajectory of your life in terms of your ability to function on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
But how did your
day.
recovery also then impact your career choices or your desire to work in the field?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I started having this. I started wanting to do something in the field when I was still in radio, and there was a company called FCD, which is Freedom from Chemical Dependency. Mm-hmm. And this organization that was based out of Needham, it was a nonprofit. And what they did is they contracted with public or private schools all over the country, and they would take people from recovery that would work as like teachers, and you would go on site for like four days a week, and you would tell your story and also talk to kids in schools. So this was back in 1990, in the 90s. I had a very good friend that I knew from recovery that was working for them, and I was so inspired by her work. I just thought it was so great. So I had this, this kind of a gut then. We moved to California, my husband and I. I got transferred out there with a job, and picked up my recovery out there, just like I did here. And we moved back here. His job actually brought us back to this area, and we moved to Hingham. We had a family. I got pregnant, and we bought a house and got to know everybody in the neighborhood, and it was like an amazing community, and very social. Hingham's a very social town. Mm-hmm. And so I had to, what kind of wine are you bringing? What do you want? Play groups, pizza nights, yacht club, the whole, school functions. It was, I don't drink. And always like, oh, really? Like, okay.
Was it sort of a novel idea back then? I think it's more common today for people to
I
say,
think
I don't
it's
drink.
really still very hard. I think that it shouldn't be, but I do think it's really hard for women because as a mother, I was reluctant, and I don't think I did say I'm an alcoholic. I don't think that because I was very aware that I would be driving kids around, and I was a little bit, for the first time, wondering, like I would explain away. I've been sober though for 20 years, or I would want them to know that I'm not an active alcoholic, and that's
right.
I really encourage people. I really encourage people, everybody actually, that I ever come in contact with that are starting their journey of recovery, that out in the world, define yourself as someone in recovery. Mm-hmm. Because the alcoholic the word is negative, and addict is, and but the word recovery is, I've never had anybody, like it's such a positive.
Change the semantics.
Yeah, and change the and it relieves the shame of saying, oh yeah, hi, it's nice to meet you. These are my 4 children. I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
So in meetings, in AA meetings, I always define myself as that. That's very sort of sacred to me. But and so because I think I was so open about it, people just started, and it was organic, really. Like someone would call me about a friend of theirs that was struggling, or a family member, like just for advice, because there's no information. No one really knows what to do. So really how people get help, and probably still continue to, is somebody that knows somebody that's in recovery, or that
Right.
went through it, or a family went through it, and so you reach out.
Well, it's such a personal thing that
yeah.
it makes sense to connect personally that way.
Yes, I just love like going over to families and talking, and like, oh my gosh, recovery is amazing, and it's there's help, and there's like so much you can do. And so I ended up calling a friend of mine that I had gotten sober with back in the day, and he had a practice in Norwell, DL, and I said, hey, I kind of want to get into this. What do I do? And he's like, well, if you want. I said, I really love like working with families. So I did I went back to school. I got my license. I got trained in interventions. I ran groups. I worked for him for almost 3 years. And then I was at a training at Gosnold and met the CEO, Ray Tomasi, who was a legend and still, and loved, his whole, really everything about Gosnold. It was a pretty big organization. He started it as a detox, and then it had inpatient and long-term care, and there's sober living, and it was all how do we do this better? How do we address this better? And all these cool, innovative programs that we did during the opioid epidemic. We created recovery coaching. We created overdose intervention with police departments. We started that on the Cape. We started the intervention program at South Shore Hospital with Dr. Tracy. We piloted so many things. He wrote 1 million grants, and it was always like patient-centered care. How do we remove the stigma? At that time, the film The Anonymous People came out, and that really opened the door of, really changed the language of addiction in that time. It was identify as recovery, don't refer to drug screens as dirty. You have a positive or a negative screen. Don't use the word addict, use substance use disorder. Instead of alcohol. Like all of these, the Anonymous People brought very high-profile people out of the shadows, and they, on film, said, I am in recovery. And it was, and Chris Herren was part of that, that movie. And Chris was speaking at Gosnold, a lot of Gosnold events. One of his first events that he did for us at Gosnold was at Barnstable High School. And I'll never forget it because he was flying in from somewhere, and he was late. And Barnstable High School, they couldn't let everybody in. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. The auditorium was brand new. It was huge. I think it sat 1,000 people.
Oh, you mean there were people waiting to get in that couldn't get in because there were too many people?
It was. And his presentation then opened up, the school started calling Gosnold, like, we have kids that are struggling, and that opened up the whole prevention division at Gosnold. And Ray Tomasi would call Chris Herren and say, I just got a call from Votech, and they got kids struggling. What do we do? And they ended up putting counselors in schools on the Cape. And so it really... So it was, the career was sort of ignited with Hallie DeLaurie, my friend from AA, who is still in the field, works in a hospital system, has been in the field, gosh, so much longer than me. She's amazing. And all of this like innovation and how do we do it better, which landed when Ray retired. I remained at Gosnold for another 6 months, and then I left there, and then it was like, let's do something.
Well, so you sought out these opportunities. I mean, you didn't sit back and wait for things to come to you. You were so passionate about this field that you sought out these opportunities. And Chris Herren was a recent guest on our show, as you know.
I was one of them.
You were
That
there
was
getting
so
the
good.
Wi-Fi set up.
I just love listening to him speak.
He's amazing.
Yeah,
So, of course,
yeah.
he shared about his personal journey
Yes.
and the work that he's
Yeah.
doing. And you, as executive director, are instrumental in that work, and you helped co-found the Herren Wellness Center. Tell us about that project.
So that was when we came together. I had left Gosnold. I was doing work with, I think it was Bridge. I was doing some CARES stuff. I think that's when I
We
met
were
you.
co-chairs, yes.
We were co-chairs with Chief Olson and
Well, the chief called both of us
yes,
into his
and
office,
said you two need to meet each other.
and he said, "I want you two to run this."
Yes.
Yeah.
And so doing things like that, and then Chris gave me a call. At that time with Chris had been speaking for a bunch of years, and it was around that time that he was shifting his. They started working on the first day, and that change came because.
And that's a film.
That's a film that was produced also by Jonathan Hawk. That was released in 2018, I think, in the summer, by the Centers for Addiction and Cigna, and the reason for that was Chris would go and he would tell a story, and he would the feed. I think he said this maybe in his podcast. The feedback was always from the kids. I'm so happy for you.
So sorry for what you went through.
So sorry for what you went through. I'm praying for you.
Yes.
And it was the revelation of, oh my gosh, this is not about me.
Right.
Like I want it to be about them. And that was when he shifted to the struggle and the culture that our kids are in, and in every environment. So the first day is rural, public, private, inner city. They take a very, all different school environments, and that's how they came up with that. So with all of his knowledge and what was going on, and we sort of just all pooled with a lot of help from a lot of amazing people, and Heather being like
His wife.
the instrumental person, the family member, that person that was often ignored. Back in the day, it was all focused on the patient, and as time went on with treatment centers, family programs, were introduced and helping the family. But
And she was the backbone of that family. Her commitment to him and their children is incredible. He told some pretty heart-wrenching stories about their time together when he was trying to get himself sober.
and she knew his heart because they were together since they were teenagers, and I think that and I think that that's true for everybody. I mean, when families call and I talk to families, I like to really ask what were the interests prior to this problem? Like, what were they like growing up as a kid? Like, what was, because substance use disorder, addiction, we don't recognize the people that we love.
Right.
They are not the people that we love anymore. And that is, what do you do with that? And as family members, I always say, I know that you are incredibly sad, angry, terrified, hurt, and it all has to live, all those feelings have to live together. And it is, how do you do that? And
Right.
it's, so that is, that a lot of our work at Herren is the family is as important as the guest, and we do family support groups 2 a week. We have an alumni family support group, so you can always be connected to us forever. We have weekly family updates. The family, regardless of whether the guest says, I don't want them involved, our job is to service those families. So
That's incredible.
our job is reconciliation and improvement in communication, not separation. So, and Heather is, her compassion, their compassion, their willingness to be so raw with their story. Everything that I've learned in treatment, it all just came together, and we created this model that we didn't want to have a criteria. We didn't want to deny a 20-year-old student that maybe isn't in addiction, probably won't identify like that, but is really struggling.
So
and
similar to that AA criteria that your father described.
no requirement for membership.
No requirement for
A desire to get healthy, a desire to get better. We use our language that we use is, we try not to label anybody. We want to help people get healthy in their lives and pursue and look at next chapter. And how do you take I have a bunch of favorite quotes of Chris's, but one of them is, your saddest stories can become your greatest moments. You find your silver lining in your saddest stories.
Well, one of the cool things that spun off of the programs that you have at Herren is, I don't know if you do this with other schools, but you bring
Yes.
some of your guests to Hingham High School, and
Yeah.
they come and they talk with the kids in the 10th grade health class during that prevention component that Karen has in her curriculum. That has been incredibly
We love it.
impactful.
It's so amazing.
You guys love
Yeah.
it. The kids
Yeah.
love it. They go
Yeah.
home and they tell stories to
I
their
know,
parents.
yeah.
And it's so relatable for them. So for
Yes.
them to hear from that 20-year-old, I was just like you. This is what to harken back to what you were just
Yeah.
saying. This is what I used to enjoy. This is what I used to do. And then, addiction, substances kind of derailed me.
Yeah, and it's so, we bring a lot of our Hingham guests back.
Oh.
And that's been absolutely incredible. We've had some of our Hingham alumni from Herren that they really want to go and be a part of that. And, it's eye-opening for the kids because it's, I grew up in a loving family in a great home, and I had a lot of support. And it really is, the messaging is the reality that it can happen to anyone. It does not discriminate.
Right.
Struggle does not discriminate.
Right.
And everybody has it to some degree, and we need to pay attention, especially for our kids. Have these open conversations and communication. Have people that, we always say in the classes, have someone. Is there someone in your life that you can, confide in, go to? There needs to be that kind of outlet for sort of the culture of what they're faced with. And
Right.
and they're faced with, me, like you in the beginning, it was, what did I have access to in the 70s? What they have access to today is terrifying.
Yes.
And it's
Life-threatening.
it's life-threatening, and it is dangerous, and it's just, these being able to do that at the high school is Karen running the health department, really, she's worked so hard on the mental health and addiction curriculum in her class. It's
Yes.
the work that she's done, and she has really researched so much and wants to offer it, and of course I love going because I was at that high school.
Right.
And it was very different, and that they all matter. That's what the kids all matter, and so that's been great. We did Situate one year, I think. We do New Bedford. Our trainer is from the New Bedford school system.
Okay.
So we have an opportunity to go there. We put it out there like it's so good for our guests because they feel like they're giving back, and they can kind of, as they're telling the timeline of their story, it really validates, their commitment to recovery.
Right.
So that's been so special.
I would imagine that there's a bit of a modeling piece in there too. They're looking at these younger
Yes.
kids, and there's a sense of not obligation, but there's a sense of I need to be someone that these kids can look up to.
Yeah, I need to protect them.
And protect them, right?
We need to protect these, like, it's scary out there. It's dangerous. Like, take it from me. So, yeah, that's been wonderful.
One of the other things that you do, which I think a lot of people don't realize, but you're definitely an unsung hero here in Hingham in terms of this. You offer your skills, your abilities as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and interventionist for free to families in Hingham that are struggling. And I know that Hingham CARES has sent some families your way, and you hear from people throughout the community. Why is it that you do that? As if it weren't apparent already what the answer to that question is, but tell me from your own perspective, why do you do that?
Yeah, I think for the reason I wanted to get into the field, I want to share. I think that it's sort of tragic that we don't have it. People don't know what to do. People are really lost with this, and like you said, it's personal. It's really scary. It's private, and I know that, and I know. So I just want to be available. I don't know. I feel like I love this town. I've raised my kids here. I grew up here. I would do anything for anybody in the town. I would do anything for anybody that needs help, and just point people in the right direction, give them some comfort, ideas, resources. It's just an obligation. If I have the knowledge, you have to share it. And so I get that's why, really. Are you obligation.
Meeting a lot of people who are concerned about their kids, or are they mostly adults who feel as though, like
everything,
you did, it runs the gamut?
Absolutely. It's absolutely everything.
Okay. You've had so many successes during the course of your career, so many things that you should be proud of. You've accomplished so much. Is there anything that's particularly challenging in this line of work?
Oh gosh, yes. This line of work is challenging. Every day it's discouraging. I think one of the most discouraging things is that people don't know enough. We don't, and how do you get people engaged to want to learn enough? It's just, it's hard. It's to watch so many people suffer. Treatment is tough. Access. So it's like an uphill battle. We're always running uphill. People are losing their lives every day. And so it's hard, it's definitely, it's a fight. It is a fight. And there's amazing people in the field that are in it, in the fight. And, but I think the discouraging thing is what do we do? And, all the prevention initiatives that are going on, like, thank God, every one of them is important, and every town in the world, everything that we can do to educate our kids. It's kind of like looking at the next generation and how are we going to help them manage the world that's really kind of scary. I mean, that's discouraging, right? So there's a lot of, it's do what we can, do it really, really well. I think that's how we all do this work, is if we do the best we can every day and we give it 1,000%, like, good will come, but it's not 100% good comes, because the odds are stacked against the disease of addiction. It just is.
Well, I always end my interviews by asking my guests the same two questions. And the first one is this: you're the mom of 4 boys. So you can speak from personal experience as well as your history with substances and your family's history as well. What advice do you have for parents about helping their kids make safe and healthy choices around substances? And you're such a cheerleader for prevention. So what is the salient prevention point for parents to take away with them?
I think it's conversation. It's having conversation with your kids from a really young age. I think and that conversation is the reality that just because something is legal doesn't mean it isn't harmful. So just because alcohol is legal, it doesn't mean it isn't harmful. And it doesn't mean that every adult can manage alcohol either. I think that having like frank discussions about people will experience alcohol differently, and be aware and notice that. So it's really conversation. It's being a resource for your kids. It's letting them know what is out there and why it's dangerous. And then what Chris always, the whole first day message is why? Why are you doing that? Why do you feel the need to change yourself? And the culture, and how do you live in the culture? And if you don't want to do it, don't.
Right.
You don't have to. One of the things that my kids have told me, which is very refreshing, is that in this day and age, there isn't a whole lot of like, if somebody abstains at a party or they don't want to do it, there isn't a lot of, come on.
Pressure.
And I think that that's huge. And I think that people recognize the other thing that we like, Chris is in his first day documentary is, you have no idea what that friend is going through at home.
Right.
You have no idea if somebody in your friend group has been touched by addiction. And so be careful how you act around it. And I'm going to quote him. In the first day, he says, because someone's heart is breaking because of it.
Right.
So, and it's not shielding our kids from family, it runs in the family, or so-and-so, suffered or, lost my kids knew at a young age. I lost my cousin to this disease through suicide when I was 19. He was 26. And then you have the tragedy of addiction, but then introduce, like, here's the beauty of recovery.
Right.
And we need to not rely on that if we provide our children with safety, that it won't happen to them. Because I know as a clinician, as a parent, as someone in recovery, that any one of my kids at any time in their life can face this issue.
Right.
If you drink enough, you will become an alcoholic.
Right.
If you dabble in, you can easily become addicted. So it's awareness is super important. Everything that you do at Hingham CARES and the prevention, but the prevention coalitions and us going into Hingham High School, they need to hear it all the time.
Right.
Growing up. So that it's sort of embedded in their brain of, if they recognize a friend that's struggling, they know, like, I should help them. I always encourage my kids, never, ever leave anyone behind, ever. If you get in trouble, we're fine with that.
So let me skip to my second question, because you're navigating that territory. So what advice do you have for young people about making safe and healthy choices around substances?
Be cautious. Please be cautious. Think twice, think 3 times before you do anything. Never, ever, ever put your drink down. Never, ever, ever take anything that's given to you. Never put anything in your body. There's this thing where, I know the dealer. It's a dealer. Like, why are we trusting our lives? I'm going to put my life in the hands of a dealer.
Right.
Like, that's not, if you think about it, it's not even common sense.
Right.
That, and everybody does that, I know that person. So it's.
Well, add to that the fact that the brain is not fully developed. So there's that risk factor associated with the choices that kids make just inherently.
Yes. Well, also adults. Cocaine has made a huge comeback. And that's, terrifying. There's everything. It's cut with everything.
Right.
So be cautious. Don't believe that it's doesn't have anything in it. Never drive. call a friend, call a parent, call an aunt and uncle. Never leave anyone behind. And the most important thing is know every day, really, really think about the fact that your life matters. And so do and the people you love, their lives matter. The people that love you, their lives matter.
Right.
And a wrong decision can change the life of everyone who loves you. And it's scary. And be curious about, like, what actually am I putting in my body? And kids today, what I love, the younger generation, more so than ours, they'll talk. Like they will engage. Mm-hmm. And
you mean have conversations about
this
topic.
Conversations about it. And they're bright and, they also have a lot at them. Mm-hmm. And a lot's coming. And, substances, they could get anything in Hingham. Anything.
Right. And
we as a community need to understand that, yes, it is in the town.
Right.
And just what do we do with that? Give your kids the awareness that it is, and it's scary, and be careful, and like all of those things.
Right. Well, so thank you so much, Lori, for being with us today and for having this important conversation. Thank you for joining us on Substance Free 02043. I'm your host, Kristen Root, and I hope that you will tune in again.